Hi, my name is Stephanie Amrell. I'm going to talk to you a little more specifically about resourcing. The concept comes for me from thinking about a therapeutic style of somatic experiencing where a person is working through something that is disturbing to them, and within the therapeutic dyad or couple, what you as a therapist do is have the client kind of hone in on the physiology of what that experience is. But what resourcing is to imagine an opposite physiological response. So something that has no resonance of that negative physiological response. I can give you a very specific example. I had an experience at a conference not so long ago. A male authority figure was crossed some of my personal boundaries, not in any threatening or super negative way, but enough to create a pretty high level of discomfort for me. And while I was doing this resourcing, I was asked to imagine a man in my life that never, ever crossed boundaries and who instead created a kind of feeling of comfort, safety, warmth for me. And immediately I had an image of a friend of mine who I spent some time with in South Africa, and his face just was beaming kind of in my imagination. And that act of imagining him completely countered the negative feeling. And then what you do in terms of the style of this is to rock back and forth into the positive image, experience, sensation, and met that out with the negative. So you think a little bit about the negative and then think about the positive, and in that way sort of erase or wipe out the negative response that gets stored in your body. That's a somatic example for you. Practically, what you can take away from that narrative is to literally, even on the spot, have a counter. Even imagine a counter. When was there a time where I talked to somebody about this topic and I totally felt heard? That would be a counter to not feeling heard. Maybe you're waiting for somebody to return a phone call and it's driving you nuts. And envision the feeling of when somebody called you out of the blue and said, hey. Or you don't have to have a contrary experience. You can just have an opposing feeling, right? So I don't feel seen in this particular moment, or I feel disregarded, and that feels painful. What is an emotional experience? It's the opposite. When someone really sees you, or when someone comes up and gives you a hug, it's yours to imagine. But literally engaging in this kind of back and forth can diminish a negative response in your body. But I also think cognitively. And so this is what I also want to offer today. I'm working with this coach from Germany. She's awesome, Assunta. And she had me fill out something that I've seen a million times, which is the wheel of life and like the aspects of this wheel. So you have components of the wheel include your spiritual life, your emotional life, your family, fun, your work life. I actually think it's pretty useful to think about these different elements of your life and resourcing at the same time. Alas, what would that mean? If I'm thinking about it from a spiritual angle, if I experience something that just creates for me a sense of not having any purpose, for example, that would be a spiritual assault in my imagination. So I feel like I have no purpose. How do I counter that? When did I feel like I had a purpose? When do I experience purpose or meaningfulness in my life? Can I counter that even in my imagination? Maybe you act it out. Maybe it creates new behaviors. But even when you just simply have the feeling of a lack of purpose, or you're going through your days and are frustrated with meaningfulness in your job, for instance, can you find the time, the place that is a physiological counter to that lack in your spiritual life. Like, when have you felt purpose? What does that feel like? What's that experience like? Can you hone in on that? That's resourcing. If we put it in to the cognitive realm, that would have to do with what you think about, right? Resourcing then would be framed in terms of your messaging to yourself. Wow, I look fat today. Well, stand in front of the mirror and say, I look great. Or alternatively, I'm a great person. Whatever it is, it's going to kind of counter that negative message that you're giving to yourself. And it may not be just the opposite. There's an element here that I'm not clearly articulating, but it's worth underlining. It's not just about what you think, but it's about what the thought elicits in your body. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, or rather, I'll give you a different example. I make a mistake. I think, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. How did I do this? That creates a physiological response in me. For me, I have had an experience recently where I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I get this wrong? How did I imagine that this was going to be this way and it actually turned out this way? How did I let myself believe that? And then the feeling for me, the physiological response was actually anger and frustration at myself. I could only deal with that for so long because it's super unpleasant. So how do I counter that? Well, I don't counter that necessarily with a cognitive shift, although I do have the cognitive shift. I'm actually thinking about, how do I show myself tolerance? How do I show myself patience? Oh, that was reasonable to have that belief. Okay, you did. It's over. Move on. Or for me, the opposite of anger would be compassion. So how can I then just hone in on my compassion towards myself? And you can even hear as I'm talking to you, my heart rate goes down, my tone just softened. Even as I'm thinking about moving from this anger at myself to compassion for myself, my physiology changes. At base, I think that's really super important, and that's what you call resourcing. So in any given experience, whether it's your thought processes, whether it's your spiritual life, whether it's your emotional life, whether it's engagement with your family, to continually think about resourcing if you're experiencing something negative or a negative emotional surge, to find that counter that's positive immediately shifts physiology. And the more you do it, the more it can kind of feed into positive neurological pathways. Thanks.